one and all. It is actually very nice and bright day here. Very happy to greet all the young and fresh minds who have stepped into the MDS program this year. I welcome you all to the whole new branch of endodontics as well as research. Thank you for joining. I am greeting you all from Chennai amidst this heavy floods. So if there are any interruptions, please forgive me. I have tried to do my best. Before I move on to the presentation, I would like to thank a few people. I would like to thank the entire team of organizing such a wonderful program. My special thanks to the Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics of SRM Dental College and Hospital, Ramapuram, and my special thanks to Mahalakshmi ma'am for always having trust in me. I would also like to thank the Manav Rachna Dental College and Hospital for this wonderful opportunity. I would like to extend my warm, heartfelt gratitude to my mentor, teacher, and guide, Dr. Emma Srinivasan sir, who is my head of the department and who has always been my pillar of support in all my endeavors. And I would like to thank my entire team, Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics at Sri Venkateswara Dental College, who has always supported me in all means. With that, I move on to the topic for the day, which is research ethics. And I am Dr. Poorni, professor from the department, here to share a few insights on this topic. So when we say research ethics, yes, of course, it feels like an ocean. It is an ocean. And I have tried to gather a few drops and present it to you. And what are those which I am going to cover in this presentation is what is research ethics, why there should be ethical standards in biomedical research, identify the ethical issues in biomedical research, and to elaborate a little on the role of an ethics review committee. With that, let us jump directly into our presentation today. What are research ethics? It is nothing but the application of fundamental ethical principles to planning, conducting, and publishing research. So when we say research ethics, the first thing which comes to everybody's mind is that I am a good person and why do I need to worry about research ethics? So here I would like to clarify one thing before we go into this presentation is research ethics isn't about bad people doing bad things. It is just about imperfect people doing imperfect things for a variety of reasons. So when we say imperfect things, first we should know what is being perfect. So in life, we always follow the moral foundation theory, which says no harm, no cheating, no betrayal, be pure and be liberal. So similarly, we have the moral foundations for research too. It says doing good for humans, animals, planet, future generations, etc. via the pursuit of truth and knowledge. Our duty is to respect individuals and animals, and our obligations to the society should be kept in mind. So this constitutes the moral foundations for any research. So what are the principles of research ethics? It is beneficent, that is, the research should be beneficial. Non-maleficence means do no harm. Then comes autonomy and justice. So when we say beneficence and non-maleficence, it dates back to the period of Hippocrates, whereas the anatomy and justice evolved later, that is in the 1800s. So what springs from autonomy is informed consent, truth telling, and confidentiality, which is going to be dealt in detail in our presentation. So coming to the next question, which was stated in the objective, why should there be research ethics? So there are 3 points which are actually vital, that is to protect the participants, patients, society, resources, and the researcher. The second is to ensure accuracy of scientific knowledge. And the third is to protect intellectual property rights. So let's see each one of them in detail. So coming to the first one, which is the protect participants, patients, societies, resources, and researchers. So when we say protect from what? Protect from harm, We need to show respect. That is, we need to respect the confidentiality or privacy of the subjects. We need to get informed consent of the subject, refrain from exploitation of vulnerable participants, and refrain from indiscriminate use of resources. So when we talk about human subject research, there are two important documents that protect these subjects. One is the Nuremberg Code of 1948 and the second is the Helsinki Declaration of 1964. So what is this Nuremberg Code of 1948? This Nuremberg Code of 1948 was formulated in this year. This was after an incident which was by the German scientists. These group of scientists, what they did was during the World War II, they conducted experiments on the concentration camps were there, where there were people in those concentration camps. So they conducted various studies on these subjects, even without their consent, and a lot of people died during these experiments. So this happened without the consent of the people who were taking part in the trial, and hence a Nuremberg Code came into formulation, which was the first international document which emphasized on the voluntary participation and informed consent from the subjects who were taking part in the any type of human studies. And voluntary consent of these subjects are absolutely essential, or it is mandatory when you enroll subjects to your studies. What is this informed consent? These subjects should be given an opportunity to choose what shall or what shall not happen to them in the due course of the study. And this consent process should include information, comprehension, and voluntariness, which means you should give information to the subjects, allow them to comprehend, and let them voluntarily participate in your study. It should always be obtained from the participant before they enter the research, and there should not be any sort of influence on the participants to consent for the study. For example, you give them monetary benefit or any other sort of benefits which will influence to participate. That should not be encouraged. And this informed consent can be either written or verbal. Most of the time, when written consent is not possible, we get a verbal consent, but in today's date, it's always better to get both written and verbal consent from the patients who are going to be enrolled in your study. So the second document, which is the Helsinki Declaration. So what does this Helsinki Declaration of 1964 include? Basically, they say that in this declaration, it emphasizes that research on humans should be based on results from the laboratory and animal research. That is, you cannot conduct any human experiments without having a positive result from the laboratory and animal research. It should always be reviewed by a committee before you initiate any human research, and informed consent of the participants should always be obtained, and research should be conducted by medically or scientifically qualified individuals, and risk should not exceed benefits. This is very, very important. So that is on the human research ethics. Coming to genetic research. So what does ICMR say specifically about the ethical practice in genetic research? So this genetic research is not so much applicable for us, but yet a few of us are still involved in this genetic research, and hence this has to be kept in mind. That is, India is one of the very few developing countries which has guidelines that exist for genetic services and research and for biobanking, and this guideline has been issued by the Indian Council for Medical Research, and it is called the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants. So it's a completely different guidelines. So in case anyone is taking up genetic research, please do follow these guidelines from the ICMR. And coming to the ethical issues in cell line research, the cell lines are the cells which are taken from the human subjects. We always feel these are just cell lines and you don't need consent for it. No, it is not like that. Any cells are actually donated by an individual subject or a patient. So the patient should be informed about the research which is going to be done on the cells that have been taken from the subject, and their consent, that is informed consent, should be obtained. You should have no financially The donor should not have any benefit, and the confidentiality of the donor should be maintained. Coming to the animal subject research, animals are also are creatures with intrinsic values, and we should always respect them. They are creatures who have the capacity to feel pain, but many a times they may not express. But we have to understand that they do feel pain, and it has to be considered. The three R's, which are very important for animal subject research, are refine, reduce, and replace. Refine means refining the experiments to cause less pain and distress. Reduce is to reduce the number of animals used for the study if possible. And replace means replace higher order animals with lower order animals. This animal research is always monitored by the Animal Ethics Committee, so which provides an avenue for public participation in regularizing the animal research, responsible for approving and monitoring animal research. And these ethical committee for animals or animal ethics committee is present in those institutions which have accredited animal research establishments. And whenever you are presenting a study, it has to be cleared by your institution's ethics committee as well as the animal research committee from the accredited animal research establishment where the study is being conducted. So that is very, very important and we need to keep in mind. So this ends the point to protect the participants. Then comes to ensure accuracy of scientific knowledge. So ensuring accuracy includes the methodology, which needs to be very rigorous. You should have a very fair subject selection. You should state the research methods very clearly. You should not falsify, modify, or omit any sort of extreme value or data. You can't pick those data which are going to be favoring your results, and those which do not favor your results should not be omitted. Use the actual data for all analysis, and the errors which are occurring in your study needs to be reported so that anyone who's going to conduct the study are aware of the various errors that they can expect from the study. You should always be aware of the conflict of interest, which is very important, and we will deal with this again in detail. Data and the materials should be available. That is, the raw data should be available for others for further studies and all that. And secondary data can be used for various studies, and accuracy of the peer review process should be maintained. So as I told you, conflict of interest is something which we most of us fail to understand. It is nothing but just a simple situation in which one person will experience two conflicting pulls, one for the personal interest and other from their professional obligation. So they are now stuck between two things, not knowing which side to take. So that kind of situation is called as conflict of interest. For example, if any study of yours is funded by a pharmaceutical company and the study involves the product of the same pharmaceutical company, the pharmaceutical company will expect you to give results which is favoring them. But unfortunately, the results of the study may not be so. This kind of situation is actually called conflict of interest. So in such cases, what should we do? There are other conditions also where a study is funded by an agency and they feel that they have the right to decide whether you can publish the findings or not. Simply as I told you, the pharmaceutical industry. In such cases, you can publish, but you should declare the conflict of interest. That is called as declaring the conflict of interest. So this is actually a section by itself in your publication. So they say declare your conflict of interest. And then whenever we publish, it should always be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So what do we mean by the truth? Be honest about your research. Do tell whatever you have got in your research. Do not manipulate. The whole truth. Omitting a part of the research findings which are not favorable is actually constitutes misconduct and it is violating moral norms. So you need to tell the whole truth and not only a part of it. And the third thing is nothing but the truth. That is, it's also dishonest to puff up one's results by adding irrelevant or misleading information or overstating their significance. So all these to be avoided, and you have to be honest about the research you have conducted. Coming to the peer review process, it should always be fair in reviewing and should have appropriate expertise. Identifiable reviewers should be there, and the timely review should be done, and helpful critics should be included. So if all these are not present, then the integrity of the process is lost. So be sure that these elements are in these 5 elements are mandatorily included in your peer review process. So that ends our point on how to ensure accuracy of the scientific knowledge. The third comes the protecting intellectual property rights. So when we say intellectual property rights, what do you mean by that? Whenever somebody else's work is used, do quote the reference of the original author. Always acknowledge everybody who has contributed to your study, and the authorships should be very carefully determined. So when we say authorship, what do we mean by that? It is nothing but giving credits and implying accountability for the published data. And make sure everyone who has contributed to the paper has been given credits as authors. And people who are recognized as authors should understand the responsibility and accountability for what is being published. So what are the various types of authorship? You have a lead author who is the first author, usually who performs the central experiment of the project. Then we have the co-author, one who has made significant contribution to a journal, and the corresponding author, one among the various authors who will handle the correspondence for the publication and holds responsibility and also signs the agreement, which means any future issues will be dealt with the corresponding author from the journal. What are the authorships that has to be avoided? Gift authorship. Gifting authorship to friends and many people in return for a favor they have done. This is actually not ethically right. Forged authorship. Some names are included in the list of authors just for a benefit of getting the work more easily published, because including names from the editorial board of the journal will give them more chance to get the article published, or in return for some monetary benefits. This should not be encouraged. And ghost authorship, one who has contributed for the article is not included in the list of authors, is also not right. So all these 3, gift authorship, forged authorship, and ghost authorship, should be avoided ethically. So when we say the word contributor, we always feel author and contributor are the same. No, authors are different from contributors. How? Authors are those who are involved in all aspects of the creation of the work, while contributors are people who have merely provided technical support or writing assistance. So authors are those who will be included in the list of authors, whereas contributors can be given an acknowledgement section, and usually they are not included as authors of the particular scientific work. You should always disclose your research funding. Any funding body who has funded your research has to be listed or acknowledged in your publication. The funding can be in the form of a grant, funding, gift support, technical support, or anything. So all this has to be acknowledged and given due respect for their contribution towards the conduct of this research. So when we don't do any of these, any single point is left, we say it is breach of ethics in research, and that would lead to scientific misconduct, that is misdemeanor, which we may try to justify the shortcuts. Actually, many a times we actually don't do it, but we are forced to do certain things to reach a certain goal, which is actually ethically not right. Sometimes the case may not be clear and we would have done the ethical mistake. So these are called ethical dilemmas, which is a huge topic on its own. Sometimes we may have to think about the implications of an action in order to see the research ethics issues. So these things can avoid a few ethical mistakes which we commit. So now let's move on and see a few conditions where there is a breach of ethics, but it is actually not bad or not completely wrong, but ethically these are not right. So what are those situations? Yes, let's see case 1. wherein two graduate students have made some measurements on a new material to prove their hypothesis that the results lie on a curve. The two students started to omit those data points which were lying away from the curve or which were away from what they expected. So they excluded these data points in analyzing the results. What do you think? Did they do this right? No, it is unethical because this would cause falsification of data. You should include outliers and give probable reasons or found out statistically acceptable methods to trim these outliers. So you should always include all the data points. Now, this is case 2, wherein a group of students conducted a research on the awareness of diet and dental caries. Later, they submitted the same research paper to two different journals to see which journal publishes it first. Is it right? Of course not. Many of us do this, but it is unethical because this would result in inadvertent double counting or inappropriate weighting of the results of a single study which distorts the available evidence. You should submit it to one journal and wait for the response prior to submitting to another. So this mistake many of us do, you, me, and many more do this. So please try to avoid it because it is unethical. Case 3, where four friends decide to do a work together on a research project during their vacation. But unfortunately, what happens is one of them had to travel abroad for a vacation and could not contribute to the research. So the friends, they complete the research. The rest, three of them, they completed and they decide to include all four names in the presentation. What do you think this is? Is it correct? This also happens in our day-to-day activities. Just for friendship, we will think like we started off as four, so let's include all four names in the presentation. No, this is again unethical as only those who contributed intellectually should be cited as authors. Those who contribute in other ways may only be acknowledged, but you cannot include them as authors. So these are very simple examples of breach of ethics. So why do we do this breach of ethics? That is, before we go on to that, there is actually a body which sets all these standards and rules and regulations and policies to monitor how a research is being done. They make sure that this breach of ethics is not there in your research process and which continuously monitors your work is the ethical review committee of the institution or the institutional review board, which actually works to maintain the ethical standards of practice in research, to ensure protection of subjects, research workers from harm or exploitation, and to provide reassurance to the public and protect researchers from unjustified criticism. But though we have so many standards, rules, and regulations, still there is a breach of ethics because we resort to some shortcuts and misdemeanors, not willingly but by force. So what are those factors which encourage these? When we see it is the peer pressure from the workplace, that is publish or perish, which says you either publish or you perish. You have to do this to retain your job, or you have to keep up with your peers. That is, your friends have published 10 articles and you have done only 5, so you have 5 more to go this year. And you're forced to secure grants and you're always on your toes to be the first to a discovery. So these are the various pressure which we encounter in our day-to-day workspace or anywhere. Though we have this sort of pressure, but still we can avoid certain unethical issues and we can do things ethically. So always, whenever we have to, we can do it without resorting to shortcut. If you really want to do it, you can do it without any excuses. So always follow ethics in whatever you do, not only research but for your life. So I would like to end this presentation with a very good quote which I always like is, wrong is wrong even if everyone is doing it, and the right is right if no one is doing it. So always choose the right path, be ethical, and do your research. Happy researching. And with that, I like to come to the end of this presentation. Thank you one and all for your patient listening. You have any queries, you can feel free to mail me or WhatsApp me on this number. Thank you so much for your patient listening, and it was actually a wonderful time with you all. Hope I have done justice to what I have actually been given. Thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers once again for such a wonderful program which has been very meticulously crafted. Thank you SRM team, and thank you Manav Rachna team, and special thanks to Mahalakshmi ma'am for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you one and all. See you soon later.